Yeah, we've all heard that that term, hitting rock bottom. You know, we hear about it a lot of times. We feel it in ourselves. You know, is this rock bottom? And when it comes to addicts, I mean, we're very aware of rock bottom, but a lot of times, it's different for everybody, and a lot of times it seems like the rock bottom can be a moving target. You've heard that. I didn't realize my rock bottom had a basement. There's all these kind of cliche-ish little things, but the bottom line is, in my opinion, as a alcoholic for 25 years, and now who has been sober for 2 years and almost 8 months, I realize now that my bottom is something I had to hit. And it's something that I had to go through in order to get to where I'm at today, which is, the peace and the serenity of sobriety and being in recovery. But man, the last thing I wanted to do, I had to totally admit defeat over this thing, this thing that I could only touch. It has no soul. It has no voice. It has no spirit. It has no life. This bottle of vodka, and I was bound to that. I was bound to this inanimate object, and I was a slave to it. But at the same time, even though I could admit it internally that, that I need help, but until I had to be defeated. I had to be totally defeated because, man, I didn't want to quit. I didn't want to surrender to anything, and I definitely did not want to admit that I had lost control because, I feel like I'm like most people, and I think most people are, we're wired to fight harder or to get smarter or to work more, and when it comes to something that I am outmatched, okay, I might be a decent guy in family life. I might be a decent guy in business. I might be a decent guy to friends. But when it comes to this one thing, alcohol, I'm outmatched. And that was the turning point of my bottom. Now, rock bottom is going to be different for a lot of people. And man, I love when I hear people in the rooms of recovery that I go to every day. I love when I hear stories that, they didn't lose everything yet, but they've realized that they needed help. I love that because that wasn't my story, but everybody has a different rock bottom. You would think, okay, here's a couple of bad things that you would think would be my rock bottom. Number one, before I got sick, I was so distraught with my life. I just couldn't stand myself. I just couldn't stand myself anymore. There was one night where, I actually did, I don't know if it's called attempt suicide, but I held a gun to my forehead, and my finger was on the trigger, and it was something that was real. I was staring at myself in the mirror, and it was just a little bit of pressure, and it would have all been gone. And thank God that didn't happen that night, and thank God that I was able to hang around just a little bit longer. Actually, a lot longer after that before I actually sobered up. But you would think that would be rock bottom. A couple years after that, probably 3 years after that, I got cirrhosis, and I've talked about that on an earlier video. I got cirrhosis, and you think when the doctor tells you have a 50% chance of living in the next 90 days, here's a guy that I've always been somewhat healthy. Just years prior to that, I was doing these mud run obstacle courses. I was in really good shape. I was still drinking, but to be told I was active, I had an active career, and to be told that you're going to die, you have a good chance of dying in the next 90 days from, I don't know if they call it stages in cirrhosis or not, but it was It was bad. You think that would have been rock bottom, but yeah, I quit drinking for about 2 months after that diagnosis. But do you know I went back to drinking for another year and a half of back to the normal self for another year and a half after I got cirrhosis. So you would think, the thing with the suicide attempt, I guess just an attempt. I mean, I had my hand on the trigger, finger on the trigger. And then the diagnosis with cirrhosis, you'd think that would be rock bottom, but it wasn't. What my bottom was, it was emotional and mental. I got to a point, because I went through a depression too, right prior to the cirrhosis, but I just got to an emotional state where it was complete darkness, complete despair, and I just had enough of me. And that's the only way I can describe it, but that's what was the case with me. That's when I realized that there was no amount of willpower, there was no consequence, there was nothing on the outside or within me that would keep me from drinking. I was going to drink unless something bigger happened. And that's when I realized I needed help. So admitting defeat was more than just saying the words. It was like a gut feeling. It was an internal, below the surface level admission that I was defeated, that I am outmatched. And that, a lot of times people think when, rock bottom, that's about as low as you can go. But actually, it was the beginning, because I was 55, when I got sober. And so I had fought it for a long time. And then finally I was beaten into submission by alcohol itself. And the thing that I used as a god in my life was vodka. I used it when I was happy, I used it when I was sad, I used it when I was angry. I depended on alcohol. And so ultimately I was beaten into submission. And that sounds harsh. It sounds harsh, but the reality of it is it was actually a gift. Because then I was able to get help. And it was only at the point where I admitted defeat that I was able to get help and actually experience a life today that I didn't even know existed. Today I say all the time that I feel like I'm living in a foreign land, because I'm living a life today, and it started just a few months into sobriety, and I started to clear up and sober up, and it still takes a while to build back those neuro pathways, by the way, but once I started to sober up and I got into the steps of the 12-step program of AA is what I'm involved with every single day, and I live my life by these principles. Once I got started in doing that, then I was able to get past that, and I started to see that there was this incredible life, and it's a life that I didn't understand. I never lived it before, where you could have peace and you can have serenity and you can have laughter and you can have genuine friendships and you can show love and you can receive love. I didn't understand all that because I didn't live it. So, if you do feel like, maybe if you're watching this and you feel like you are at your rock bottom, that is not necessarily the ending. It could be the very beginning. It could be that moment that you were just like me, and that you can finally get to that point of get past yourself and realize that you need help. And of course, in my experience, I used the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I love it. I think most people have a misconceived idea about it. They see it on some TV show, or they just, I think pretty much it's just fear. AA's been around for 90 years, so I mean, it's helped millions of people. So anyway, I encourage you to reach out or send me a comment, tell me your story or anything you want, but just wanted to talk a little bit today about rock bottom.